Back for our Friday midweek update, and we're tightening after yesterday's video by sticking with the same core correlation while making two small pivots for salary flexibility and leverage in a slate where both opponents have a tough defense overall. We're staying the course at quarterback. We're still on Sam Darnold at 16,200 with a dash rank of 118 projected points against New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 15 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 30, 9, and 9. The why hasn't changed from yesterday. The passing tree is condensed around Jackson Smith and Jigba, and per the coverage this week, Darnold just won his first Super Bowl with Seattle and drew public credit for a revival arc that included confidence building with a former coach, as reported by Warren Moon. That supports our red zone trust and stacking logic with JSN and Jason Myers. We're also keeping Drake May at 16,500 with a dash rank of 95 and 21 projected points against Seattle, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 22 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 16, 17, and 19. The field is hesitant after the Super Bowl shoulder storyline and the debate raised by Fox Sports' Nick Wright about the Patriots' injury reporting, which we're using as leverage. We still like the volume in a trailing script with Seattle bringbacks. Running back, no change at the top. Kenneth Walker III remains a priority at a 14,700 with a dash rank of 82 and 16 projected points versus New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 12 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 21, 39, and 17. The news backs the role. He was Super Bowl MVP, visited Disneyland with Darnold the next day, and there's been buzz about his future in Seattle, all signaling trust and touchdown equity we want in a tight matchup. Here's our RB tweak from yesterday. We're moving our secondary exposure from the punt we discussed to Ramondre Stevenson at 13,200 with 16 projected points against Seattle, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 13 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 7, 12, and 16. The reason is role stability and price-adjusted leverage in May stacks. New England drafted Trevayon Henderson in 2025. But Stevenson remains their established back, and in a quick game script, he can stack touches to hit this projection, even in a tough spot. Wide receiver, we're doubling down on the core. Jackson Smith and Jigba stays locked at 11,100 with a dash rank of 127 projected points versus New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 23 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 34, 11, and 14. The news is overwhelming. Articles detailed that he played the biggest role of any receiver ever for a Super Bowl winning team, that he has taken over as Seattle's primary receiving threat in year 3, and that he rose to the top of the league as the receiving yards leader. That's elite volume plus ceiling, so he remains the centerpiece of our builds. We're keeping Rashid Shaheed as a large field value dart at 6,300 with a dash rank of 78 and 10 projected points against New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 9 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 6, 9, and 1. The why is splash play and special teams leverage. Coverage called him one of the most dynamic return specialists in the league, and even spotlighted him among the unsung heroes during the conference championship run. If New England tilts resources to limit JSN's explosive routes, Shaheed's schemed shots and return equity can swing tournaments at low salary. We're adding a micro-exposure punt to Derecki Young at 1,500 with a dash rank of 45 and a near-zero projection versus New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 1 fantasy point per game and goose eggs in the last 3. This is strictly an extreme, large field salary relief play correlated to Seattle stacks, anchored by his special teams presence noted in recent features. Tight end, we're making a small change from yesterday. We're keeping A.J. Barner at 7,200 with a dash rank of 64 and 8 projected points versus New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 9 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 3, 0, and 3. The reason is correlation and price. When red zone targets swing away from JSN, Barner offers cheap access to touchdown equity in Darnold builds. We're also rotating in Austin Hooper as a punt at 3,000 with a dash rank of 43 and 3 projected points against Seattle, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with 4 fantasy points per game and recent scores of 0, 2, and 0. This is a cap-saving bringback for May stacks when you want to jam an extra Seahawk. The floor is thin, but the salary unlocks is the point. Kicker stays unchanged. Jason Myers is still core at 8,100 with a dash rank of 48 and 11 projected points versus New England, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with recent scores of 7, 11, and 8. The new supports ceiling and floor. He hit 5 field goals in the Super Bowl, the most ever, and there was real MVP debate around him. In a grindy matchup, he correlates perfectly with Darnold and JSN. Andy Borregales remains our secondary kicker at 7,500 with a dash rank of 46 and 9 projected points against Seattle, who have a tough defense overall. He's about 0% owned with recent scores of 4, 4, and 10. Coverage highlighted his standout rookie season and consistency, which fits May stacks if drives stall in scoring range. Defense, we're holding Patriots DST at 6,000 with a dash rank of 58 and 6 projected points and recent scores of 12, 7, and 5. By the numbers, their opponent rank is 14, which means they face a middle-of-the-pack defense overall on the other side. But our angle is leverage against Seattle's star power at about 0% ownership. If pressure creates short fields or turnovers, this is the contrarian path. For flex and value construction, nothing changes at the top. We center builds around JSN at 11,600 with the dash rank 100 and 27-point projection in a tough matchup because the role and news-backed ceiling are unmatched. Kenneth Walker III is our alternate flex for touchdown equity, backed by the Super Bowl MVP narrative. For a deep salary saver in Seattle-heavy stacks, the Seahawks team value at 4,400 with a dash rank of 53 and 5 projected points faces an opponent who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall and provides cheap correlation at about 0% ownership. To recap why we're holding steady from yesterday, Darnold with JSN and Myers remains the primary stack because of consolidated volume and red zone stability, supported by post-Super Bowl reporting on Darnold's command and JSN's historic impact. Walker stays prioritized for touchdown equity after his MVP performance, while May remains our sharp tournament pivot on volume, with Borregales as a kicker complement. The tweaks are swapping our secondary RB exposure to Stevenson for price-adjusted leverage and adding Hooper as the punt TE to open cap in May stacks, all while keeping Barner for Seattle correlation. In a slate where both teams have a tough defense overall, we want secure roles, correlated scoring, and near-zero ownership. Let's build accordingly.